It's hard to believe that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's performance of the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto was more than 40 years in the making and against tremendous odds. Though it took that long for the concert to come to be, the instrument has always been a part of the minister's life. The minister has 9 children. Mustafa is the 6th child.
It just was natural. This is something that Dad did, and we knew, from children that this violin is very serious to my father, and it was off limits to the children. Nobody could go nowhere near that violin.
Minister Louis Farrakhan, known by most people as the fire and brimstone leader of the Nation of Islam, a man who's refused to back down and apologize for standing up for what he believed was right and truthful and fair. A man who spent over 40 years communicating through the spoken word. But Minister Farrakhan also has a message for humanity through the art form he's been practicing for over half a century, since his mother gave him his first violin at age 6. He quickly fell in love with the instrument and dreamed of becoming a concert violinist. Over the years, he competed and won national and local music competitions, including an appearance on the Ted Mack Amateur Hour.
Up there in Boston. It says here that you're a track runner at English High School and that you've equaled every record in school, right?
Yes, and I hope to break some next year when I put on a little more weight.
You do, huh?
Yes.
How about your violin? Can you play that as fast as you can run?
Well, not quite, but I've got a lot to learn. I hope to break some records with this someday.
You're just a champion at heart, aren't you? All right, what are you going to play?
I'm going to play Charters by Monte.
Monte's Charters. Ladies and gentlemen, Louis Walcott.
For 2 years while I was in college, I played in churches, I played at the chapel service, and Horace Heidt came to town, and because of segregation, the NAACP really raised some sand, and Horace Heidt gave blacks with music a special audition, and I won the audition and went to perform with him on his national radio show coming from Raleigh, North Carolina.
But it wasn't long before he stared directly into the ugly face of racism, segregation. Discrimination in America of the 40s and 50s were forces that frustrated and deferred Farrakhan's dreams, stacking the odds against him. By now, the piece he was learning was the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto.
It was the last work that I was doing when I left playing the violin about 44 years ago. I was in high school, and my teacher, who was Russian, gave me the Mendelssohn. We had worked on the first movement, and then I went on to college. And since there were no black violinists in a segregated southern city, I could not take any more formal lessons. So music, in a sense, died in terms of formal training.
But his artistic roots and classical desires always tugged at him, and his violin was never far from his side. Then one day in 1955 in New York City, Farrakhan heard the Honorable Elijah Muhammad speak. Muhammad was the leader of the Nation of Islam. Muhammad's teachings of black pride and self-determination made Farrakhan feel that at last he had found justification for his existence as a man, and support for aspiring to heights the larger society said were out of the realm of reality for a black man. Elated at his newfound understanding, Farrakhan immediately joined the nation. Shortly thereafter, Muhammad asked all the artists in the nation to choose between entertainment and religion. Farrakhan chose his religion, believing that communicating the truth to black people was more important than his personal goal of artistic expression.
Growing up, and as I got older, we used to always wonder why he didn't give any of his children any instruments to play. And you know, at that particular time, he said that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that as black people, we have enough entertainers, we have enough sports people. You know, we need to have more thinkers.
He never again played his violin in public, and for the next 40 years, traveled literally millions of miles, speaking before tens of thousands of people at every location, dedicated to the enormous task of evening the odds and building a nation of people who are proud of their black heritage and determined to be the masters of their destiny. The culmination of his work came in February 1989 when he dedicated his beloved Chicago mosque. It was the pinnacle of his professional career, and during the celebration dinner, he finally had a chance to reflect on his own personal aspirations to be a concert violinist. And so began again a journey of beating the odds, a journey that when completed sparked a universal reaction from those who had had the privilege of being there. The Honorable R. Eugene Pencham.
I was awed, I was flabbergasted, I was astounded, I was amused, I was astonished, I was pleased, all in one package, in one emotion, surprised. I didn't have the vaguest idea that he was such an accomplished musician.
Before I was born, my father was in show business, and I never really got a chance to see my father perform in show business. So I always known him as Minister Farrakhan. And this was a good time for me to see my father in a whole different light, and I really enjoyed myself.
The esteemed Dean and music professor, Willis Patterson.
For the minister to have been able, after that long hiatus from active involvement with practicing and with the literature, to pick his instrument up in a few months and make an appearance before the National Association of Negro Musicians, first doing the Mendelssohn, and then later doing that magnificent concert that he did in Chicago is really nothing, fairly short of miraculous.
Miraculous, astounding, astonishing, but most of all, it was a man challenging himself to do his best, to beat the odds, to never give up, and to reach heights that others felt he could not reach.
At the dedication of our mosque, Miss Sylvia Olden Lee, who was a very well-known accompanist and master's vocal coach, accompanied a vocalist who sang at our dedication. And she came to the house for dinner, and there was a string quartet playing, and I just got inspired.
Sylvia Olden Lee, a fixture in African-American music dating back some 50 years. Her father was the son of a slave. She got her gift of music from her mother, a fair-skinned, green-eyed black woman who turned down an opera career with the Met after being told that to take the job, she'd have to agree to pass for white.
When the dinner wound down, someone walked up to him with a violin out of the case, and so I said, "Here goes mighty like a rose," or something. It was the most electric, it was brilliant, prestissimo, just flying and perfectly done. I was just captivated.
She was so shocked at my musicianship that she began to tell so many people about my musical ability.
Among them, she told Dean Willis Patterson at the University of Michigan's prestigious School of Music. Dean Patterson, the music school's first black faculty member, has been there 27 years. Olden Lee and Patterson, members of the 75-year-old National Association of Negro Musicians, were preparing for the group's annual convention to be held in Chicago.
I said, do you have your celebrity for Chicago yet? And he said, no, Dr. Patterson said. And I said, well, what about Minister Farrakhan? What about Minister Farrakhan? I said, for violin. Violin.
She called me after that occasion and told me that you won't believe how fantastic a musician this man is. And I said, well, but I can't imagine. I thought she might have been talking that he, you know, that I'd heard that he'd been a calypso singer and done some jazz, and I figured that's what she was talking about.
I said, I know, because I didn't know it either. It's the most stunning thing to learn. Minister, he plays violin. I said, like Isaac Stern and the rest of his ilk.
Patterson wrote to the minister requesting that he play for the convention.
And at first I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And finally I said, I think I will.
He was a sensation. He spoke first. He wanted to play first. I said, no, you speak first and then you play, because church is going to be out when you get through playing.
So I spoke, and then I picked up my violin and I played Meditation from Thais and Shahadas. And the people, you know, kind of went off. And they were so shocked, Farrakhan with the violin.
They were all absolutely astounded at the musicianship and tone quality and the affinity to the music, because he played without score. The Meditation from Thais.
When he started playing this meditation, I know the people, you know, I actually seen people in the audience crying.
Not only was this a genuine person of high intellect and integrity, but also a person who was unusually knowledgeable about music for a person who was not a practicing musician.
Shortly after that concert, Michael Morgan, an internationally acclaimed conductor, approached the minister. One of the preeminent African-American conductors of this century, Michael Morgan has conducted Italy's San Remo Symphony Orchestra, the New York Philharmonic, Austria's Vienna Philharmonic, and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra.
You realize immediately when you meet him that the story is more complicated than you're getting just by watching your television. There's a more complicated person here. And so I met with him after that, and all he wanted to talk about was classical music. This was his real passion, because he really wanted a chance to talk about music, and it was wonderful.
Morgan invited the minister out to play with his orchestra, the Oakland East Bay Symphony in California, hoping to bring more African Americans to classical concert halls.
Later on, he put forward the idea that for his 60th birthday, he wanted to play the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, because he'd been practicing it, and also as an example to the next generation, to the very young, how important he feels it is to study music.
I feel it's time for me to give this gift to our people and to inspire young people who may not understand or love classical music, and hopefully to open the door to young black artists to the concert stage.
Former Chicago Mayor Eugene Sawyer helped bring the concert to life. A longtime civil rights activist and a confidant of the late Chicago Mayor Harold Washington and of Jesse Jackson, Mayor Sawyer has devoted much of his life to uplifting the conditions of African Americans. Mayor Sawyer served on the concert committee, now named the Friends of Muhammad University.
There's a strong sense of support in the African American community for the minister. We understand what his position is here, what he means to us, and what he means to young people. We need some role models for young people to look up to, and we felt he was one of those role models.
The man expresses a belief in the ability of human beings to rise to a higher level than that which, unfortunately, many persons in our society believe him to be bound by.
So the concert is planned as a benefit for Muhammad University.
I believe he chose Mendelssohn because, I mean, that's all I ever heard him play. You know, when I was a child, I'm sure with a person of that ability, he could have played something else, but that was something, I mean, it was just right that he played the Mendelssohn, because this is what I think all of my brothers and sisters, that's all we used to hear.
Chicago businessman Spencer Leak chaired the Friends of Muhammad University. Leak has also spent much of his career championing the rights of African Americans.
The minister at this time was studying the violin, planning for some opportunity to display his musical talent, having made the commitment to his teacher that he would do Mendelssohn's. And so we just, I guess everybody brought all of those composites, those components together, and said, why don't we celebrate the minister's birthday with a concert, and let's do it for the benefit of the school. And consequently, the idea was born out of that.
People who were really concerned about getting things done in our community to make a difference, to make a change, and also about getting the ministers a position and posturing him and having people to understand that he was concerned about our problems and wanted to do something about them.
Our image of the minister was this dynamic leader of the Nation of Islam, and we just could not fathom that he could play a violin, and not knowing how well he could play, we were just curious, and so I think that added to our excitement over having giving it.
A lot of folk really looked at the idea of the minister doing the concert. I would imagine a lot of people said, I mean, the minister playing a violin, what happened to the revolution?
Farrakhan then began the enormous task of preparing and perfecting the concerto. First, he went to Chicago violin dealers Bain and Fushi, the top violin dealer in the U.S., selling instruments like this nearly 300-year-old Stradivarius valued at $3 million. Bain and Fushi representative Joe Overmeyer.
We had heard that he was a good violinist. We had read it in several articles, and we always wondered, well, is he a good violinist? This is interesting. If I would think of a violin for Minister Farrakhan, I would think of a violin that has a lot of rich qualities to it. Dark, rich qualities, not so much the power, because he is a powerful player. He brings that to the violin himself.
Overmeyer directed the minister to renowned violin instructor and professor of violin at Roosevelt University, Elaine Skorden-Forman, an instructor he chose because she's not only a teacher to violinists playing worldwide, but also a performing soloist.
I went to his home when we met, and I found him to be most cordial and gracious and charming and in love with music.
Very knowledgeable about music, about instruments, certainly. And I think he told us that earlier in his career, when he had really been practicing a lot, I'm not sure what age, but you know, he had been in New York City and made the rounds to the various violin shops and was well acquainted with dealers and fine musical instruments.
He explained to me how, as a youngster, he had studied the violin and really didn't have any formal training since the time he went off to college.
Back when I was around 4 years old, when we lived in Boston, Massachusetts, my father would always be playing his violin in the morning time. You know, we would wake up to the violin, and I could recall, you know, my family, as my sisters were going to school and my older brothers were going to school. At that particular time, I wasn't of age to go to school, so I used to walk around the house and follow him around from room to room, watching him play the violin. And at that particular time, it was the first movement of the Mendelssohn.
What he had studied but never quite completed was his favorite violin concerto by Felix Mendelssohn. So he thought this would be the perfect thing to perform, but we had to do a lot of work because he only learned the first movement, and there are 3. So we got started the following week. What was so very interesting was the fact that the minister picked a concerto by a Jewish composer, and all of his most admired violin virtuoso artists were all Russian Jews. And also, so was his teacher. I think back in Boston, must have been from the name that he gave. I can't quite remember his name, and so am I.
Foreman says she knew immediately that the minister had great talent.
When you see someone who does something who's very talented, you can see it right away, you can hear it right away, that they have this inborn natural talent. And that was very evident in the way he played.
But she was concerned that someone with such a busy schedule could find the hours and hours of time needed daily to practice.
He told me he would find the time. He said he got up very early in the morning and did his practicing almost before doing anything else, and he was very dedicated to this project because he knew that it couldn't possibly happen without the kind of time and dedication that he was willing to do for it.
Foreman coached the minister for 18 months on a piece that for many violinists is impossible to master.
It's sort of like the plateau. If someone can perform the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, they've gotten some kind of status as being a violinist rather than only just a student.
The minister worked hard to master difficult passages like this one.
All sorts of different combinations of use of the bowing and being all over. Did you notice it went from the lowest notes to the highest notes, and it had trills and double stops and everything combined, all in quick succession.
Meanwhile, the concert was coming together. Michael Morgan agreed to lead the orchestra.
The things that made this concert so important was that the minister wanted to show as an example to the young people that follow him how important he feels classical orchestral music is. And all of that really ties very well into the whole notion of developing new audience, and this is really the mission for American orchestras, in fact orchestras all over the world now.
One comment he made was that, you know, sometimes when people aren't exposed to this kind of music, there's really a lack in their lives. And here, if we could talk about classical music and expose young people to it, and it would have more an uplifting effect and kind of broaden their horizons. And this was what the angle he was coming from and what interested him.
And that was another reason it was important to do this concert as an example to younger people of what can be accomplished when you spend a life even as a devoted amateur.
Next, the group tried to secure the Chicago Sinfonietta, playing here at Orchestra Hall as the orchestra. The Sinfonietta was designed to give African Americans and other minorities an orchestral experience. At first, the group agreed, but problems soon surfaced.
We thought that we had an agreement, if not in actuality, in principle, with the committee representing the Chicago Sinfonietta. However, we found out subsequent to that there was some problems that had arose from certain members of the committee supporting the Sinfonietta, in that they felt that the minister might be, and they used the term might be, controversial, so controversial that the Sinfonietta could possibly be compromised by accompanying the minister. Their refusal or their denial, we felt was not consistent with their charter. However, because we chose not to confront them, we did not deal with that issue at the time.
Not wishing to harm Orchestra Hall, the Sinfonietta, or the conductor, the minister decided against further action. Instead, Leake and the committee members asked the Sinfonietta for a meeting.
Emanating out of that discussion was the formation of an independent orchestral group for the purpose of accompanying the minister. Some of the musicians in that group were musicians who played for the actual Sinfonietta.
If you have a chance to even make an attempt to make things better, you have to take that chance, and you have to go after it. And I think everyone on the stage understood that.
The Honorable R. Eugene Pincham, a retired justice of the Illinois Appellate Court and staunch civil rights activist. His career is spotted with the achievements for the rights of humanity.
When people in a position of that power to use their power to give vent to their personal attitudes about people rather than for the purpose which the man is performing is out of line. I think it's inappropriate. If Minister Farrakhan has said something that offends these people, I think it's out of line to say to him, to say to other people, that you cannot participate in a concert with him because he has said something with which we disagree. I think that's totally inappropriate.
I was on the phone every day to one side or the other talking about this concert.
If the hostility towards Minister Farrakhan arises out of the fact that he is a Muslim, and there has been a historical feuding between the Muslims and the Jewish people, then it ought to be defined as that. It ought to be defined in religious tones.
We did not want to make a racial incident out of this, so we were concerned that we'd have an integrated group of musicians playing for the minister, and that did happen. The minister, for a lot of people who do not know, is a very humble man, and he did not want any confrontation, especially at this time. We were trying to build bridges.
For those of us who participated in this concert, it was meant to be the tiniest of little steps in the right direction. But even a tiny step in the right direction is far better than either standing still or taking a step in the wrong direction.
Everybody was just focused on what the good that it would do, not only the musical aspect of it, not only the what it would do for the university, but what it would do to bridge the gap between the black and white community.
Music to bridge gaps and open doors. Father Michael Pfleger, a longtime devotee to human rights. Father Pfleger has spent his life crusading against negative influences in the African American community. The head of a Catholic congregation in the heart of one of Chicago's African American neighborhoods. A strong supporter of the use of music to heal wounds, he and Farrakhan have worked to bring people together.
I think the music will open some doors, and there were some people who will maybe come to a concert, maybe listen to a tape, or maybe see a different side of a Farrakhan because of the music. So some people will open doors, and it will open some avenues. But I think still every individual has to make that conscious decision to want to know what you have to say and hear what you have to say, and then decide for myself.
Finally, an orchestra was formed and named the New World Symphony Orchestra under the direction of Maestro Michael Morgan. It was composed of members of the Chicago Sinfonietta, Lyric Opera, and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. All the while, the minister kept up a vigorous pace, an extensive travel schedule, visiting numerous cities each month, speaking to sellout crowds in the U.S. and abroad, and taking his violin on the road with him so that he would not miss an opportunity to practice. While at home, he often awoke at 1 in the morning to steal a few precious moments of practice time. Even with this, his practice time was far less than the 6 to 8 hours of daily practice most accomplished violinists insist upon.
I would accompany him much of the time and have him get the sense of the whole piece that way. He said it was very helpful. And the first few times he said he couldn't concentrate on what he was doing because he was so distracted by all the other notes that were being played at the time. But after a while, you get used to that. We worked a lot together, piano and violin. We worked a lot violin with violin, and I demonstrated many, many little details, and he was just eager as can be to absorb all of them.
The minister mastered the difficult passages.
That's very difficult, and it's all by itself. The violin is playing totally alone, and there's no way that anybody else can play louder or cover it up or maybe disguise some of what's going on. You're all alone, and it's very clear what's happening, and he played it well, really well.
By April of 1993, the minister was ready for a warm-up concert. The place was Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where he'd won the height competition 40 years earlier. The Winston-Salem warm-up went well. A reporter from the Winston-Salem Journal called it one that had thoughts erupting like firecrackers, an astonishing performance for the degree of technical refinement, sure tone, and rhythmic incisiveness, a performance that at times turned into athleticism, adding, one got the sense from his playing that he could do anything he set his mind to. A New York Times reporter had also slipped into the audience. He asked the question, can Louis Farrakhan play the violin? God bless us, he can. The reporter went on to say, Mr. Farrakhan's sound is that of the authentic player. It is wide, deep, and full of the energy that makes the violin gleam.
I was very elated, but he just didn't play that instrument. He smashed. He got down, let me tell you. I mean, the brother, you know, it was like our hearts was in our throats, you know, and I was like, oh, Pops, he's about to do it. He's in front of all of these people. And he represents our family, and on a broader level, he represents a people. So we didn't want him to get up there in front of all of these people and make, you know, critical mistakes, because my father is a perfectionist. So I wanted it to come across excellent and beautiful, and it did. And it came across like that, and we were very elated. I mean, I was so elated that, I mean, the tears were just running down my face, and I looked over at my mom, and my mom was just crying. I mean, it was just a very, very emotional moment for us to see our father in another light.
1 month later, it was time for the Chicago concert. The minister spent the early part of the day practicing at home, then arrived at Christ Universal Temple for a much-anticipated performance, and a sold-out crowd awaited the sound of his violin.
A lot of these people had, obviously, some of them had not gone to an orchestra concert before, and were extremely excited to see that, because there's nothing like live music, there's nothing like a live orchestra, and they were very excited to see the whole orchestra here, and then also to see that the minister was going to play along with us. It was just practically overwhelming, and you could feel that electricity from just radiating up from the audience.
I want them to get another view of my father. You know, he has been a stereotype, you know, as this racist, hater, and bigot, and what have you, but music really bears the soul.
Meanwhile, back in his dressing room, the minister waited, warming up his violin for the night he'd taken 2 years out of his life to train for.
He said he had the jitters a little bit. He's been in front of audiences before, but he never had to play the violin in that context with a professional orchestra. And Michael Morgan, of course, at the time was the assistant conductor of the Chicago Symphony, so this was real big-time stuff.
I would say not nervous to the point where you just like a basket case or something like that, but he was definitely, this is something that he has not done in over 40 years. I seen in his eyes that he was very, very, very focused, like before he goes out and do a major address, that he was focused, and I knew, I prayed that God be with his fingers, that he does not forget, parts of the Mendelssohn and mess around and jump from the first movement to the third,
And then it was time. The audience was awestruck.
That night, people were watching the concert, and at some points during the concert, they would clap, not knowing that you shouldn't be doing this and interrupting the artist or his train of thought. But the fact that they were so proud and happy to see him being able to do that and get into those situations where he really was getting down, as black folks would say, playing the violin.
The minister's family anxiously hanging on every note.
I have seen him on many occasions get to this particular passage and mess up a note, and I can see in him, because he always like, we praying. Oh, God, please, make the minister successful with this particular passage. And I'm gonna tell you, he nailed it.
And that's the way I felt actually about the slow movement of the Mendelssohn, is that you could hear more of his personality come through. And this was what it was important for the people who were here to see. Because even if you've seen someone speak, and even if you've seen them talk on whatever subject you see them talk on, if you hear someone pick up an instrument and play it, you hear a part of their personality that you cannot otherwise access. It's the part of their personality that can't be put into words. That's why they have to pick up an instrument.
If the minister had decided to become a professional violinist and a professional musician, he would have done extremely well. He has that kind of natural ability, and he had very fine teaching as a youngster. He would be well amongst the top-rate violinists in the world, I'm sure. I was very proud to be his teacher. He did a splendid job.
Hear him for yourself. Don't let somebody else form your mind and mold your way of thinking in life about Mr. Farrakhan, about yourself, about anybody.
I greet all of you, my dear and wonderful brothers and sisters, with the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. I thank him for my mother, who is not here tonight, but in spirit she definitely is here. And I thank him for my wife and for my children, who my wife has put up with me.
The minister's comments after the concert were so humble and so mutually beneficial to all. We just felt we were on a high leaving there, because we felt that in the aftermath of the concert, that only good things could come forward.
The fact that he sacrificed 2 years to try to show the world who Minister Farrakhan was, or who he is, to try to show the world that he is not anti-Semitic, that he is a person of compassion and of love and of kindness and of tenderness, that he would take the time, 2 years of his time, to encompass that into a concert is meaningful in my judgment.
I believe one of the things of playing the violin was for them to get a better look at him and for him to get closer to his brothers and sisters that are afraid of him. When you're talking about freeing an entire people, you know, you need all the brain power to accomplish this goal.
I am, shall I say, hopeful that this concert and this effort on the part of the minister will expose him, a side of him that some of his opponents have not seen and not witnessed, and hopefully that will give them a better and a greater and a more accurate insight of the man than they have had without this exposure.
Music is a universal language. And just as every note has a different vibration, every human being vibrates differently. As you notice, when these musicians were warming up, it sounded like chaos. But when the concert master came out to prepare the way for the conductor, he signaled to the oboe, and that wonderful reed instrument gave the A that they all tune up by. And A, I think, is 440 vibrations. Now, after they all tuned up, they were ready for the conductor. Now, the conductor's job is to know the score of everything that was played tonight and to interpret that score that the soul of that person who wrote the song will live through him and through the wonderful musicians who play under his baton. Human beings are like this. Different shapes, different colors, different sizes, different vibrations. But what the world needs now is a composer. A divine composer who can put human beings together on the staff of life so that we don't vibrate creating dissonance and discord, but vibrate creating harmony and unity and peace. That is the lesson that a symphony orchestra taught us tonight.
I think you can begin to erase years and years of confrontations with a concert of that magnitude. You have to start somewhere. We've got to, as a people, begin the process of getting along. That process has started, and we've had success in some areas, and then we've taken backward steps. However, that does not deter me or those of us who feel like the Minister Farrakhan that we've got to eventually bring all people together. He loves every man. There is no man, black or white, that he hates. And no man can bring him down to a position where he would hate him.
I have known Mr. Farrakhan for maybe 10, 12 years. I have sat at his home. He has sat at my home. I've spent hours talking with him, discussing with him. I've listened to him speak at the mosque. I let him speak here. I've listened to tapes upon tapes. Minister Farrakhan is neither anti-Semitic nor anti-white.
I'm not suggesting that anti-Semitism does not exist in America. Indeed, it does. And I'm not suggesting that it should not be attacked. Indeed, it should be. But to single out him and say that he is the leader of any anti-Semitic movement in this country is just outrageous, outrageously false.
This beautiful and wonderful violinist who has taught me for the last near 2 years and prepared me to come before you tonight, Miss Elaine Scorodin Foreman. Would you please come up, Miss Foreman? Miss Foreman is Jewish, and this is a real testimony of black-Jewish relationships.
He's a role model to me as a white male. And he's a role model because, one, he speaks what he believes. Two, as this person with a spiritual rootedness, he makes it very clear that his responsibility is to not fear anybody but God. That's what we have to instill in our young people. He demands that we address the real issues. He has a hunger to unveil truth and stop putting it under the rug and to pretending like it doesn't exist and not ask the hard questions. He has a conscience, not just to America, but to society, to the world. He's a conscience, and he continues to prick it and demand that we address those questions. And doing that is painful to people. Truth is painful.
For us to come here tonight with Christians, Jews, and Muslims together with music, we had to overcome something to get here tonight. And the forces that we all overcame were forces that bring death to the human spirit. Fear, anxiety, wonderment over pain and suffering and loss. But we overcame that to come here tonight, to be together in a night of music.
Yeah, he's my father, and I feel very honored to even have a man in front of me like this. But honest to God, I tell you, he is the most beautiful human being besides my mom's. You know, I gotta go home now. You know, but he's the most beautiful human being that you would ever get a chance to meet in this life. Through the violin and through him, the way he is, it really showed me how to really be a man.
He stands up for us, and that's basically what I really love about him.
Stay with us now as we take you to Chicago's Christ Universal Temple and bring you Minister Louis Farrakhan playing the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. But first, some brief comments on music.
For me, music, like truth, is the essence of my life. When I gave up my music and became totally focused on the plight of black people, I became somewhat nationalistic and narrow in my focus. Music, as it expands my breast, it expands my breast to include more than just the condition of my own people, but the condition of the world as a whole. music and its universality causes the person who is in tune with what he or she is playing to become aware of the beauty of human beings, all human beings. There is healing in music, there's joy in music, there's the enlivening of the human spirit by means of music. The human heart can be crafted just like the Strad or the Guarnerius. And when you've got the right kind of heart and the right kind of message, and that message coming through a pure heart, that's music. And that kind of music of knowledge clears away ignorance, which is the worst enemy of the total human family. And once you impart knowledge to people out of a heart filled with love and compassion, then you lift people from where they are to where God wants them to be. Naturally, I would think that those who never knew that I played the violin and all of a sudden saw me playing the violin, many thoughts might go through their minds. People really don't know Farrakhan. They know me as a teacher, but they don't fully know the soul of a man, and I think that can best be expressed through music. Mendelssohn is a favorite of mine, and it matters not to me whether he's Jewish or Christian or Muslim or atheist or agnostic. The man's music was simply divine. What will we see tonight? What will we hear tonight? And I hope that they will be pleasantly and joyously surprised, and I hope they'll be uplifted. And if they come feeling low, I hope they will go out feeling a high. And if they come ill, I hope they'll go out feeling well, that music played from the souls of people who really love can help in the transformation of human life.
And now, against all odds, and for the love of music, Minister Farrakhan offers to his beloved community and to the world the tender and compassionate music of Felix Mendelssohn as he performs the famed Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. Art is a healing force throughout the world. African American art, particularly music, has been able to permeate homes throughout the worldwide community and communicate our respect and appreciation for humanity. What we in this country call soul. Louis Farrakhan has conveyed his love and appreciation for the world's people through his music and through today's performance of the Mendelssohn. We hope that you remain with us as we all attempt to build a more just, honest, and decent society. For as we approach the 21st century, your quest to do just that will take many forms. It is our benefit musically and spiritually that Minister Farrakhan has chosen to perform the Mendelssohn as one such form.